Welcome into the Free Outside Show. Another day, another Jeff.
Month of Jeff.
We have been going 2 episodes a week strong since like May 5th or something. I put out the first episode on the day that Cocodona started because I was too nervous about hearing what people thought of it. And we've been going strong ever since. It's helped me become a better person. It's gotten me out of my own shell. I really have a hard time talking to people and making eye contact and doing things with people and being social. So this has been good. All right. Today we have on Jeff Hester. He thru-hiked the John Muir Trail 30 years apart. He started SoCalHiker.net, which we talk about was a pretty huge blog about backpacking, hiking, trails and stuff in the world of blogging, which we've talked about a lot with a lot of different guests, from like Jeff Browning to Dean Karnassus to other people. I can't remember. But I think it's a really fascinating time because that's sort of when I got into endurance sports, and that's when I got all my information, and you could probably find it out there. I had a blogger or a blog spot, one of them. I moved all that to my website, thru-hiking.com. But I just think that's such a cool period of history because I still love reading versus watching stuff. Speaking of watching stuff, all this stuff is on YouTube. And a quick product review, which I've been using. I went skiing the other day and I wore the John G Vortex gloves. They actually work really good because they're just like a normal glove and they have this like wind shell that goes over them. And it wasn't that cold. It was up in Big Sky, like 30-degree day. And my hands stayed warm. Also, John G is coming on as a sponsor of the show in 2025. So you should go check out those gloves. And if you buy anything from there, tell them I sent you because that will just help us get bigger. And I'm going to announce my big goal of 2025 here. It's already announced on Patreon. If you join patreon.com/freeoutside for $5, you can learn about it there. Or just like and subscribe or leave comments on Apple. That helps. But yeah, it'll just help me go after, afford, be able to do this big thing I'm going to do in 2025. Okay, that was what we call in the business a tease. And now we're going to get into Jeff Hester. I never asked him his trail name, actually. I don't know if he has one or not, but he did the John Muir Trail 30 years apart. He 6-pack of peaks. I'll just let the rest of it be handled from the interview. Here is Jeff Hester. Today on the podcast, as part of the month of Jeff, we have on another Jeff Hester here, who I think should be famous for hiking the John Muir Trail 30 years apart, but he also is a writer, blogger, founder, 6-pack of peaks challenge, and SoCalHiker.net. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I'm honored to be considered a worthy of the month of Jeffs, and it's really fun to be able to be on your show.
Thanks. Yeah, I know we reached out to Jeff Bezos, but he was busy today, so you were our second choice.
I don't know. That would have been interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know what I would ask him. I mean, like, how much money do you have? He'd be like, I don't know, a lot.
Yeah. How much money did you make during this podcast? You know, it's like mind blown, right?
He'll make more than my whole life in the time that we do this podcast. So
crazy. Yeah.
He brings up the net worth of Jeff's a lot. So it's actually kind of good for us.
There you go. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I want
average just Jeff net worth.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a good number. Maybe there's some bad Jeffs too, but, so I want to dive into the John Muir Trail since I think we both love that trail and have done it in different ways a few different times. But I don't know that I've heard about a lot of people thru-hiking at 18 years old. How did you even come up with the idea? Were your parents nervous? How did that happen?
Yeah. So I'd grown up in the Midwest. So I had grown up around Indiana and Ohio. There's not a lot of backpacking there. Or what there is pretty, timid. It's pretty tepid. It's not really exciting, no big mountains or anything like that. When I was 16, we moved to Southern California and I got a chance to go. I think the first big backpacking trip I did was up in San Jacinto, that area. So, and I climbed up Mount San Jacinto, and they have some really nice alpine zones up there with beautiful alpine meadows and trees, and it's a lot of granite. It's very similar to the Sierra Nevada, and it whet my appetite for backpacking. So I got involved doing more backpacking as a teenager, and there was a group of us who were talking about doing the John Muir Trail. There was a friend of mine from high school and her younger brother who were both interested. And then we had two adults come with us, although technically I was 18 at the time. It's like we had a group of like 5 that started out, and one of them was an administrator from UCI, and the other one was an elementary school teacher and the mother of this friend of mine. And so that's kind of how it got started. And there were 5 of us. We had an itinerary of 25 days. It was like mimeographed. I don't know if you're old enough to even know what that is, but It's like predates the Xerox machine. And, it was, I still have a copy of the itinerary. It was, typewritten and then mimeographed.
Do you go to the library to like find resources, or how do you even know what you're getting into, or an itinerary? Where do you start with planning a trip in 1980? I wasn't alive, for anyone listening.
Yeah. So there were books like Thomas Winnett had the JMT guide, which is still out there, different editions updated since then. And so you use things like that. You talk to people that you knew who had done it. A lot of the same things that we do today, just a lot easier today. Like I can chat with somebody, connect to them on Instagram or wherever. And, hey, what was your experience like? What would you recommend? That kind of thing. It's much easier today. But yeah, we had books, maps for sure. So we had like all the pages of paper maps for the John Muir Trail. I think the biggest thing for us that was really difficult for us was coordinating supplies, because there weren't really solid resupply setups back then. So we had people bringing us resupplies.
But you'd have no contact with them until you met them.
Exactly. So you didn't have, there's no cell phone or anything like that. And so you had to kind of plan it out in advance. There wasn't a place where you could mail your resupply package and pick it up. And so we had some friends of ours meeting us at Red's Meadow on a particular date. And so that was kind of baked into our itinerary. Like they happened to be doing a vacation that took them up to Mammoth. And so they were going to drop off a resupply package at Red's Meadow. We had another one at near where Muir Trail Ranch is today.
Okay.
But it wasn't there then. So we had a whole group of people, friends and family. My girlfriend at the time came. And so a bunch of people came, and we had a 0 day. So we spent 2 nights at the hot springs there, right across the San Joaquin.
Yeah.
And, they packed in like steaks and all kinds of things. It was really, really nice. And then the last resupply was, we had 2 college age guys who were doing a backpack trip, and they came in, I think over Kearsarge, I want to say. And they were going to meet us at a trail junction at a certain time on a date. And we got there, and we were waiting for hours. And they're like, we don't have, like we're running out of food, we're getting hungry.
Yeah.
And finally they showed up, and not only did they have our resupply, but they like snuck in a couple candy bars and things like that. So it's really cool.
Yeah. What's the cuisine? What is a resupply? What are you eating on the trail in 1980? Is it canned food?
No. In 1980, good question though. In 1980, we had a couple of dehydrators, like the multi-layer, trays, and we were going to the store and getting like top sirloin, very lean, and having it ground and then like cooking it all up, like ground beef, and then laying that in the dehydrator and dehydrating. Doing the same thing with like chicken. We did our own jerky, vegetables, zucchini and things, onions and things like that. Even cheese, we dehydrated grated cheese ourselves. And then we put together recipes. So like we would have like a chili that was using instant rice and a bunch of seasonings and some dehydrated or rehydrated ground beef and some cheese. And it'd be amazing, of course. Anything's amazing when you're backpacking, right?
Yeah,
when you're
well,
hungry enough.
Even back then, it sounds like you're eating better than most people do now.
Yeah, it was a lot of work though. Like it took months to
Totally
prep all of that. Yeah.
For the calendar year Triple Crown, I dehydrated 80 to 90% of my meals, and it takes so long. It was like get up early, prepare one, start it, go to work, come home, bag it, start another overnight. It's a lot of prep to dehydrate food.
Yes, absolutely. And, truth be told, I don't do that today at all.
Totally.
It's like I'm too lazy. It's so easy to pick up a bag of something and just add boiling water to it and let it sit for 10 minutes.
But back then too, and like when I was younger too, it's like you have more time and less money, so you're trading your time to save that money, and that's kind of how it goes. And now it's kind of flips.
It does flip, yeah.
And so back then, did you document or keep track or do any writing and stuff at that time? Because eventually that would become something you did a lot of.
Yeah. So I wish I still had this. I had a couple of little spiral brown notebooks that I would write in, and it quickly devolved to about 2 weeks in. I think it devolved into all the foods I was going to eat when I got back from the trail. Like
that's so good.
A glass of milk, a cantaloupe, things that you just couldn't have, fresh fruit, things like that. And I did bring along, I had an old Konica SLR camera. So this is before digital, and it was all film. And I brought, I don't know, I forget how many rolls of film, but it was a whole different experience than nowadays because I had to be very stingy with, is this the shot that I want to spend this, roll of film on, and I only have so many rolls, and then I'm going to be done, and I want to save them through the end, all the way to the end. That was a whole interesting experience.
Yeah,
and I've got some of those pictures still.
Yeah, I bet. Do you remember what your like big three was back then? What your gear was?
Okay, so I didn't carry a tent. So
no tent at all. Wow.
No tent at all. We did in the group have one tent and one bivouac. So there was like a young kid, Brian, who he carried a bivy sack, and he would sometimes put that up. We had a tent that was like a 3-person tent. And I think one night it was raining a little bit, and we kind of squeezed 4 of us in there for a short while. But almost every night we were cowboy camping, just lay out the thermarest and roll out your bag and camp under the stars. And when the weather permitted, that's what we did. So only one night where we really had a little bit of rain, and that was only for like the beginning of the evening. And before I went to sleep for the full evening, I was back out under the stars. So that was that. My sleeping bag was a down bag that belonged to my dad. My backpack was a backpack that my mom sewed from a kit. So it was let's see, I'm trying to think of the name. There was a company that used to make like backpacking gear kits, for like puffy jackets and sleeping bags and even backpacks. And you could buy the kit, and it would have like the pattern and all the instructions. And I think you could buy some of the material because like they were using like cordura, something kind of heavy and somewhat water resistant, and all the zippers for the pockets, and even an aluminum frame. So it was kind of like a Kelty model,
Yeah.
But it was something that my mom had to sew together, and it
Wow.
I still have that backpack. Honestly, it's hanging in my garage. I haven't used it in well, I think the last time I used it was in the 90s, and I wouldn't use it today, but it's just too sentimental. I have to keep hold on to it.
Yeah, you'll use it when you go for the John Muir Trail through hike in 20 years to complete the every 30 years.
The next 30 years. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So fast forward 30 years, I think in that time you probably did the traditional life thing, it sounds like, but you didn't through hike in between your John Muir Trail hikes, right?
No, I did not. Yeah. I mean, I was raising kids for a long time. So I have
Totally.
3 kids, and I started young. My kids are now 41, 40, and 38. The youngest will be 39 in March. So they're actually almost, like stair steps. And so there was a period there when I was pretty busy, just
Yeah.
working and raising a family and going to soccer practice and that sort of thing. We did do some backpacking, but nothing really long. We'd go for, 3 nights, 4 nights, that kind of thing. And usually always up in the Sierras, but sometimes like going back to San Jacinto, which
Yeah.
is kind of local for us.
Yeah. And I think the next part of the story, a lot of things kind of start at once with SoCalHiker.net and then your next JMT hike. How did you even decide to want to through hike again 30 years later? And why did you decide to start documenting things too?
Yeah, well, so I had always wanted to go back and do it again. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the John Muir Trail. It's a beautiful trail. I had a great experience, and I had thought about doing it like 20 years later, and it just like couldn't make it all work. My 2 sons were interested in that, and of course they had the time to do it. They were because they were still in middle school or high school or somewhere around there, and I just couldn't take the time from work at the time, so that got pushed. And then it was coming up. It was 2009, and I was really getting into mountain biking at the time. So all of this came about because of mountain biking.
Interesting.
Um, yeah. So I'm mountain biking in Southern California 3 days a week, after work, and then, longer rides on the weekend. And on one of those longer rides, we were doing the San Juan Trail off of Ortega Highway, which used to be one of the best downhill trails you could do in the country. And I went over the handlebars. It wasn't like anything dramatic, except for the fact that I fractured my wrist in 2 places and could not ride for like 3 or 4 months. And so that got me, well, I just shifted. I said, well, I'll just go and hike. That's fun. I'll do that. It's not as fast, or you don't get the same adrenaline, thrill that you get from mountain biking, but still get exercise, get outside, all the great endorphins you get from being in nature and breathing fresh air. So I started doing that. And then that kind of like kicked off like, you know what? 2010 is going to be 30 years from when I first did the JMT. That's my new target. I'm going to do the JMT in 2010 and start training for that. And back then, even in 2010, there wasn't like a whole lot of online resources for hiking the John Muir Trail. There just wasn't, And so I had a little bit of experience doing web stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, I'm going to start up a blog, and I'm going to just I have to do the work anyways and do the research on resupply and permits and all of that stuff. So I'm going to just take what I collect from that research, and I'm going to share it on the blog. And I created SoCal Hiker, and that became the place where I started doing that. And I started doing training hikes for that, and I'd write a trail guide for the different training hikes that I did. And then eventually, when I hiked the John Muir Trail, it took a while, but I finally wrote up all of kind of a
Mm-hmm.
day by day experience of, what that was about and where we went, how that worked out.
Yeah.
And the goal was really just to share that with other people who would be interested in doing the JMT and get them excited about it.
Yeah. And Did it like grow very quickly? Because I mean, it's a very full website.
Yeah, it did grow. I mean, I was feeding it. I was feeding it a lot of information. So as I was hiking every, you know, a new trail that I would do, I would put together a trail guide for that and stick that on there. Um, and a lot of people started using it. That was also sort of where the Six Pack of Peaks kind of was born. It was part of our training for the John Muir Trail in 2010. And so that was, I think, another thing that kind of kicked the growth of the website is other people saw that and were like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to be doing Mount Whitney this summer. I think I'll use the same program to train for that
Yeah.
and get me prepared.
Yeah, it's cool because it's a totally separate way of like you can get a personal trainer or a coach or something, but it's like if you can get your body ready to do these 6 tests along the way, you should be set up to hit your bigger goal of like a Whitney or something like that. It's a really
That's
fun way to think of it because it's achievements along the way rather than grinding day after day and hoping.
right. It's better than going to the gym. Yeah, exactly. Well, and where that came about is I had been doing a group hike every Wednesday night. I was living down in South Orange County, and I'd do a group hike, and afterwards we'd go out for fish tacos, for dinner. So it was kind of a social thing. It was like sometimes we'd have 4 people, and sometimes we had 20 people on the hike, and it was just a lot of fun. We'd see the sunset over the Dana Point Marina and hike back. And we were doing like 4.6 miles. It wasn't like anything, huge. And then we'd go out for tacos and made a lot of friends through that. So that was a lot of fun. But my girlfriend at the time, she was doing the hike with me. And I talked to her about doing the John Muir Trail and like, how great, awesome it was back in 1980. And,
Yeah.
at first she's like, I have some friends that are really outdoorsy, and I think they might be interested because I didn't want to do it solo. I actually honestly did. I'm a very social sort of person, and I wanted to have like, 4 or 5 people total to hike with. And so I said that, hey, I'm looking for people. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, let me know. If we click, we can, team up. And she mentioned she had some friends, and then as weeks went on, and we're doing these hiking, and she's feeling stronger and all that, she's like, actually, I think I might want to do the John Muir Trail, and that scared me because she hadn't done any backpacking since she was a teenager, and she was about the same age as I was, and so like 1980 or somewhere around there, and and so I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's not easy. It's hard,
Hmm.
and you're going to have to train for this. We're going to need to make sure that you're prepared mentally and physically for the demands of something like the JMT. And, even if you're not going for an FKT, just getting up every day and grinding, 10, 12 miles, with 3,000 feet of vertical is not an easy thing.
At altitude too. Yeah.
At altitude, exactly. And so, um, it scared me a little bit. And I said, well, I'll put together a training plan. We had our weeknight hikes that we do like Monday and Wednesday. And then on Saturday, we do these long full day hikes, basically. So we're doing double digit mileage, working our way up. And we started just like trying to get the mileage in. So we would
Hmm.
do like a 13-mile hike, just to know like, wow, my feet are really sore at the end of that, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we'd try like, all right, well, we're not going to get the elevation, but we're going to try to get the net vertical gain. So we'd go to like Crystal Cove State Park down by Newport Beach, and we'd go up and down and up and down. And in the end, we'd do like 3,000 vertical feet,
Yeah.
but we weren't going any higher than 2,000 feet, at the time. And so we had that combination, and we said, all right, now we're going to start adding the actual elevation. And that's where the 6-pack came in. So we started with Mount Wilson, which was like 5,500 feet, and then working our way up to San Gorgonio, which is oh gosh, 11,000 something. I
Yeah.
don't remember offhand.
Yeah.
And so that was a big part of our training. And we had a whole group of people hiking with us on our training hikes, and it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah. When did it click that this could be something bigger than just something you put on your blog? The 6-pack of peaks.
Yeah. So back in the early, what is that? The 2010s, there were a lot of outdoor bloggers, and the sort of, that was the thing. So it wasn't
It's
like
the
YouTube.
explosion. I had a blog back then. It was the explosion of blogging.
Yeah, blogging was kind of a cool new thing, and it was easy to get into. There were a lot of different tools. Google had Blogger or something, and
Blogger, Blogspot, yeah, different stuff like that.
WordPress, all of that stuff. So a lot of different outdoor bloggers out there. And in Southern California, we would get together, like we would all network and like, hey, let's go get together and do a hike, do a potluck, and we'll do a hike and that sort of thing. And at one of those, I met a friend, Josh McNair from Through My Lens. He's got a YouTube channel, Through My Lens, that right now it's more of a travelogue kind of a thing. He goes around with his dad and goes to all kinds of places. But at the time, he was doing a lot more outdoor stuff. And he and his buddy were training for Mount Whitney. And he said, I'm using the 6-pack to train for Mount Whitney, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And I hear that again and again. I want to say it was 2014 or 2015, I went to the Outdoor Retailer Show in Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first time kind of just going to check it out, and I went as media, being a blogger of a certain size, you could get an invite to that. And while I was there, I met some folks from Big City Mountaineers, which is a nonprofit organization that gets under-resourced youth an opportunity to spend a week backpacking in the Sierras or canoeing in the Boundary Waters. And a lot of these kids probably have never been camping in their lives. It hasn't been a part of their upbringing. And so it's a real transformative experience for many of them. And they're like, wow, if I can do this, what else can I do? That kind of thing. And I was kind of taken with that idea. And I thought, well, this could be an opportunity to create an official challenge around the 6-pack of peaks and do some good at the same time, raising money for organizations. Initially, just Big City Mountaineers. We've expanded to other organizations as well.
Yeah. Okay. And just clue us in on what it is, how big it is today, too. In 10 years now, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, so the first year of the quote unquote official challenge was 2015. We had, I think, about 180 people, and it was all Southern California. So it was just, that was where I was living. That's where I was focused. And that's kind of where it started. So we began in Southern California. It grew and grew. I think we've had close to 2,000 people one year doing just the Southern California Challenge that are registered and signed up to do it. So,
wow.
Today, and then, it kind of grew. Like I had an opportunity. My wife got a job in Oakland, and we were living in Berkeley. So I took the opportunity to scout out a Bay Area 6-pack of peaks. And then we ultimately moved up to Bend, Oregon. So of course there's a Central Oregon 6-pack of peaks, and there's a Pacific Northwest 6-pack of peaks. And then I've had some other hiking buddies. Like I had a friend, Richard Opalar, who used to live in Phoenix, and he helped put together our Arizona. We have a summer and a winter challenge in Arizona, and he helped basically scout those peaks and come up with those. And it's kind of grown from that. Today, we've got 17 challenges around the country, mostly in the West, but we have 3 back on the East Coast as well.
Yeah. And the challenge is you have a certain amount of time to hike 6 peaks, essentially?
Pretty much, yeah. For the most part, you have a calendar year. In a lot of places, like including here in Central Oregon, that really means, June through some early October, something like
Yeah.
that, depending on weather. However, we have always got people who are sort of those type A folks who are looking for a little way to add a little spice to their challenge, and they're skinning up Mount Bachelor in
Yeah.
February and then skiing down, and that absolutely counts, and or they're doing the technical climb with crampons and an ice axe and a helmet, going up Gorgonio in the winter. I've done a few of those myself. I've done San Jacintos and San Gorgonio and Baldy in the snow in winter conditions, and it's a whole different thing. It's not a hike at that point.
Totally. Yeah. It's like a crawl up a icy slope.
Yeah, yeah. But basically, you have 6 months or all year, all calendar year, and some people will do it as fast as they can. We have people who try to do it within 2 or 3 days. The, honest to God, yeah, we've got. I know two guys who did the original Southern California 6-pack. They did it within less than 48 hours, and
Wow.
that's pretty impressive. I don't think it's been replicated since then. Because there's logistics, there's weather,
Totally.
there's travel between them, there's all kinds of things that you have to kind
People
of
have
work out to
lives
make that
too.
happen.
They can't
Exactly.
always do that. Yeah.
I
And
know.
then once you complete it, there's like a party, meetups, like it's a community based thing beyond the peaks too, right?
Yeah, so we have a community online and an app that goes with it where people can connect with other hikers and get together. We do try to do gatherings as much as possible. So like anytime I'm in the area, I'll try to get together a social gathering just to, if not a group hike as well, and get a chance to meet people who are out there doing the challenges and get to know them a little bit better. We've done in the past, we had done in Southern California, we did these huge blowout finisher parties. We had like 400 people at one of the parties, and it was like insanely large. It's a lot to try to coordinate, and it was not really sustainable. So we've kind of scaled back from that and taken a little more opportunistic point of view of just, like, let's do a gathering and not make it into a huge production on its own. So, but yes, absolutely. And then we have groups who are doing the hike as a group, and they're doing their own things, like having social events and things along with those lines.
Totally.
That's pretty cool to see.
Yeah. All right, we've taken this tangent to current day. We have to go back to your 2010 hike. So did it go well? Did the 6-pack of peaks training work? How did it go with your girlfriend?
It went well. We both survived. So we started out, there were four of us. There was my girlfriend, Joan, and I, and then we had two guys one was in his, I don't know, mid-20s, and the other one who had just graduated from USC and was going to grad school after he got back from the JMT. And so we met up these guys online. We got together in person a couple times. We actually went and did some hikes in Yosemite with he's another Jeff, as a matter of fact. So,
Wow, got to get him on this month.
but yeah, Jeff Aller was, and Haria was the other guy, and they were both younger and stronger, just faster than us. We were, I don't know, 48, 49, 50, somewhere on there.
You would have been 48 if it's 30 years after your first one.
Okay, yeah, there you go. 40. I was 48. I think my girlfriend was 49 at the time, and so yeah, it went really well. At some point, I think when we were at VVR, Hari got word. He got a chance to check his email or something at the store there, and he found out that his car had broken down. So he had a car that was all packed for grad school that was parked on the street, and he had as a roommate, he gave him the keys. He said, just move it around, every so often, and if you need to use the car, that's fine. It broke down, and so he got totally stressed, and he's like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna just try to push hard, further and get out sooner so I can deal with this. And the other Jeff kind of hiked with him for part of the time, and then eventually Hari just blew past him. He left. He got out, I think, 2 days ahead of Joan and I, and then the other Jeff got out 1 day before us, and then we got out on our itinerary. So basically, we followed the itinerary to the T, got out on the date that we were supposed to get out, and it went really well. There were a few little things that happened, as it will.
Mm-hmm.
The big one was at our resupply at Muir Trail Ranch. This was our last resupply. We were going 10 days from Muir Trail Ranch to Whitney Portal. And so it's a big one.
Yeah.
And I had mailed the resupply buckets. I don't know why I did that, but like I had a resupply bucket from Hari and a resupply bucket from Jeff. And then Joan and I, I think we had there was like 4 buckets that mailed, and I shipped them all from the post office at the same time, like should have been fine. My bucket got there, and, our buckets got there. Jeff and Hari's buckets were not anywhere to be found.
Oh, man.
And they're like, what? And so the people at Muir Trail Ranch were awesome. They, basically, let us camp outside, for the night. We had dinner with them that night with all the guests that they normally have, the visiting guests. So we had free dinner with Muir Trail Ranch, which was awesome. Got to use the little, hot spring. And then in the morning when the next resupply was delivered, the truck came and they checked through that. Wasn't there. They thought, maybe there was a chance, but no. And they had, of course, the hiker buckets that people have donated because they never claimed them.
Legendary hiker box. Yeah,
exactly. They have the hiker box, and they had buckets that had not been opened yet. And they said, we'll give you guys first crack at whatever's inside, And so both Jeff and Hari, got to go in there and just like, oh, there's all kinds of good stuff in here. And plus at that point, like you've already been out for a couple of weeks. You're getting kind of tired of the stuff that you had brought.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's probably better than what was in their bucket.
Absolutely. It's like, oh, I never thought of this. Sounds really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a story you crafted about their bucket not showing up. Probably just never sent it.
No, I did send it. And the post office, so when we got back home to San Clemente afterwards, like their buckets were on my doorstep.
Just returned to sender?
Yeah. They were returned. And I don't know why. I think there might have been like one of them might have put a fuel canister in one, or maybe both of them did. And they were like, no, we're not shipping this. Or I don't know exactly what happened, but they got their stuff eventually, just not when they expected it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you guys, do you know the difference or how long the one in the thru hike in 1980 versus the one in 2010 took?
Yeah, the one in 1980 was 25 days. And the one in 2010 was 22 days.
Okay.
So 3
pretty
weeks
similar
off of work. Pretty similar, yeah. We weren't trying to break any records or anything. I mean, in my book, there's something to be said, as you know, for getting the fastest known time and having that experience. I'm a fan of the slowest known time. I feel the person who takes the longest wins. Like they have they get to enjoy it longer and spend more time out there. And I think that's, to me, that's what I shoot for, is trying to enjoy
Totally.
it.
I like doing it both ways. I'd done the JMT 3 times at least before I did the fastest known time. So I knew how to do it slow, and then it was time to go fast, try it different.
Yeah. And it's cool too, like knowing the trail, having hiked it multiple times, like it probably gives you a huge advantage when you're going for something like an FKT, because you kind of like, oh yeah, I know this pass, I know this trail. It's
every
familiar
turn
to me.
Yeah. And 30 years apart, did you recognize a lot of the trail? Did you remember so much of
Absolutely. It was so cool. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, going over some of the passes and things, that would be the big one, is like the memory of, coming down to Thousand Island Lake and just we'd be climbing and I'd be like, oh, you're going to love this. Just wait,
Yeah.
when we get up here, it's going to be amazing. And you're like, oh, yeah, right, sure. And then, for sure enough, you get there and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah, this is stunning.
Yeah.
So it was really cool. It really hadn't changed a lot. It was very much the same, and except for, probably a few more people. And, it was, like Resupply, it was a lot easier.
Yeah, totally. And so you finish this, and then do you just decide to keep SoCal Hiker blog going then? And then is that when you started adding tons of trails on there? Must become a
Yeah.
full-time job.
Yeah, well, I not really full time, but I would try to feed. We were hiking still, a lot, and that was the thing that I would look for. I rather, there's always been trails that are like my go-to trail locally. Like, oh, this is the one that I'll do if I have, an afternoon. I want to, knock it out. I could go here and have a good experience. And then, but a lot of the time I'm looking for what's a new trail I haven't done yet. Where's someplace I haven't been before? And that's what I really loved about blogging on SoCal Hiker, is that I could share those experiences and it would give me a little extra motivation to seek out, like something new and different that I hadn't been on before. So, yeah, just kept plugging away at that. And we've done a kind of a combination of some of the backpacking trips that we've done, as well as most of them are day hikes. But we do have things like the Lost Coast Trail, or it's not on there yet, but the Coast to Coast Walk from England, things like that we've done since then. Yeah. The Trans-Catalina Trail.
Oh yeah. Yep. Do you know how popular or like many visitors it would get at its peak? Because it had to be huge, right?
Oh, I don't have that data like on the top of my head.
Like 10 million visitors an hour, right?
No.
I'm just kidding.
I was getting like over 100,000 visitors a month. I don't know exactly what the number is, but over 100,000.
Yeah.
And 1 million page views in a month, something like that. So
yeah, I mean, it's just such a period of history that's so interesting. Like, it's when I kind of came into being an adult, at least. Everything was from blogs, and then YouTube kind of took over, and Instagram and social media. But for a while,
TikTok.
it was only individual blogs. Like, that's where you found everything. Recipes to hiking to training.
Yeah.
It was so interesting.
Yeah, I'm still kind of stuck there, honestly. It's like I see stuff, people doing videos, with they're like little mini trail guides, and they talk a little bit about the trail and they've got some stats on it, that sort of thing. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm a very analog sort of person. I love physical maps and I love poring over them. And to me, the blog is kind of like one step away from that. It's like a digital version of my analog history, with maps and text and pictures and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So much is lost in video, just in like that text too. Like, it's embedded in the video, but the stats on like between campsites and stuff, even like Death Valley, I'll dig pretty deep to find routes and I'll just screenshot blogs to piece together places like 10 people have probably ever gone, because I don't know, I think that works so much better than a video. There's something to be said for the full written report too.
Yeah, for sure. And so I still am doing that, not at the same velocity that I was back in, 20 years ago or whatever. But yeah, I'm still kicking at it, writing things up and doing it on the blog.
Yeah. So I've never done the Lost Coast Trail, but it's pretty high up. So tell me about the Lost Coast Trail and the fun with tides and combining. I mean, it's like two separate trails too. northern and southern half?
Yeah, I've done the northern section.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some challenges with that. At the time that we did it, permits were self-issue.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it was like 2015. They were still self-issue permits. Now there's a quota and a permit system. So you have to apply and get your permit. That was the first barrier. The second barrier is just the logistics of getting from one end to the other. And we ended up there was a shuttle at the time, Lost Coast Shuttle, I think is what it was called.
Probably.
And they went from Shelter Cove, which was where we were, the southern part of the northern section. And then we dropped off our car at the parking lot, just left it there and, kept our fingers crossed that everything would be okay. And then they took us, and it's like a 2.5 hour drive around because there's not the West Coast. The distinguishing feature is that it's so rugged that the 101 is 30 miles inland. You have to go way inland, and they're following all these roads winding around to get to the north end and drop us off. And you basically just hike back to your car. So that was the second challenge. The third challenge is the tides. And you mentioned that there's 3 places where at high tide, it's considered impassable. And the first place we were actually, we passed, I think, on the first afternoon. So we got there in the afternoon, and we got around the first one right away. And the second one was at the end of our first night where we were camped. To continue beyond that, you have to wait for low tide. And that was coming in the morning. So we just knew we're camping here. We'll wait, we have to wait a little bit longer than we normally start, but we'll get going. And then the third one, I think there's a section of like 4 miles. And that's one where you have to time it well, because if you start too late when the tide is coming in, you could end up finding yourself in a bad position. So you want to start when the tide is just low enough and going out that, and you've got time, because it's slower travel in the sand, than it is on dry ground.
Way slower. Yeah.
And you think, like the Lost Coast, I think some people think, oh, it's a walk on the beach, it's easy, it's flat, it's a lot more challenging than I think a lot of people would give it credit for, basically because the terrain is so varied. There's sections where the beach is not sand, it's bowling ball sized boulders, and you're having to walk on these things that are sometimes slippery, and you're carrying your backpack and you're trying not to twist an ankle or fall, or there's other places where the sand is just, you can't get any purchase on it. You're sinking in, and it's taking twice as long to go half as far. And then every once in a while you get to one of the flats, and the flats, you climb up on the actually more or less solid ground, and it feels like you are on a super highway, by comparison. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is so easy.
It's like you took off the weighted vest and get to like move so quick.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So Lost Coast is highly recommended. There was so much wildlife. It's really beautiful. We were very fortunate to have amazing weather when we were there. I think it was at the end of June, the year that we went, and really, really ideal weather. Got some great photos, and that's an experience. I would go back and do that one again. I think Joan would go back and do that one again too. She really liked that.
Awesome. Yeah. Just a couple more questions. First one is more of a fun but serious one. Is what advice would you give to someone who wants to build a community or networking advice? Because you are one of the best people I know at it.
Well, thank you, first of all. I never really thought of myself as like, building community or on purpose, but I think it's just about being available and personable and being out there, like for me, just getting together with people and doing a group hike and doing it on a regular basis. Wednesday night, we're going to do the same hike, meet at this trailhead, same time, and then we're going for fish tacos afterwards. And, we'll get some people who join once in a while. We'll get people who join every week. And, people get to know you, and they get to know each other. And, a lot of these people, we're still hiking and backpacking together today, decades later. So I think that's what it's about, is helping to build and strengthen the ties between people.
Yeah. And I think that concrete, this day, this time, every week, makes it so much more approachable for someone new to town or someone who just found out. Is it's not trying to guess what's happening or where. It's just, maybe I'm too nervous to show up this week, but I could go next week. It's just, you always know that option is there.
Yeah, it's kind of predictable. And there were times, like for that example, there's times when it's like, oh, I don't really want to, or, I've got other things going on. And sometimes you can't, like you're traveling or whatever. But you try to find somebody else to kind of keep things rolling while you're gone. And then it becomes something that people can count on and rely on. That's a thing that you can join. And the same thing is true online, so if whether you're doing a podcast or you're doing TikTok or whatever, if you're just out there consistent and interacting with people in a genuine and meaningful way, I think, that's going to help build your community.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like for you.
And the why has to be so much bigger than just build a community or an audience, because it can take so long. Like you talked earlier, like 2 or 3 people might show up. You got to just stick it out and do it because you like doing it versus thinking it's going to lead to something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I never went into this thinking, oh, my goal is to have, thousands of people do this. And it's like, this is what I'm going to do. If you show up or not, I'm going to do this because this is what I enjoy. And I'm going to go out and hike. And if you're there, awesome. And if you're not there, I'm going to have an awesome time by myself. I'll have a solo hike.
Totally.
And, that's how it's going to work. True story. The first group hike I led on that Wednesday night, I only had one other person show up. And she's now my wife. So
there you go. Wow.
You just never
that's
know.
Funny. Yeah.
Yeah. You never know like how that's going to end up. And I think, just doing what you love, and people are attracted to that.
Totally. Yeah. The authenticity. All right. Last question. What was better about backpacking in the 1980s or 1980 than now? What have we kind of lost over the last, now it's been 44 years to date yourself, but.
I think the thing that's different is sort of the social media pressure. If there's, like I realize that's sort of internal. It's not necessarily, nobody's putting pressure on anybody to document everything and to be on social media or anything like that. But I think for a lot of people, there is some pressure, or they feel the pressure, or they're aspiring to, build an audience, or so they're trying to make something out of that. And I think takes away from just being present in the moment and enjoying the experience. And so I think, being completely disconnected and relying on, planning and people and preparation is a big difference. And I think that's something that we've lost in some ways. So there's a lot of gains that we've had as well. I mean, I love the fact that I could use my satellite communicator and send a message to my wife when I'm out backpacking with my friends around the Wonderland Trail. And, she knows, she has peace of mind that I'm okay. And, my knees are fine and whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just hard too, because you just see all these people putting out, especially if you go on social media and it learns that you like backpacking content. It just feels like everyone is backpacking or hiking all the time and putting out content. And then when you go
Yes.
once, you feel like you have to.
Yeah. And when I did the Timberline Trail this summer with some friends, and of course, to prepare for that, one of the things that I'm doing, of course, I'm reading about the Timberline Trail. I'm looking at maps, getting all that kind of research, and I'm also watching videos, on YouTube or whatever, and you're like, oh, what did this person? How was their experience, and what did they see, and what did it look like, and that sort of thing. And then I'm also sort of critiquing, like, oh, I could do that, I could do that, I could do better,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but the reality is I don't want to,
Yep.
it's like people like Craig Adams does an amazing job with
Yeah.
these sort of like silent, videos, and it just gives you sort of a nice overview of what that trail is like. And it's, I love his work. We're very appreciative of it, and probably even more so because it's just like there's so much work that you don't see in like carrying the gear, the tripod, the camera, setting it up,
Walking
going back,
past.
backtrack, walk
Yeah.
past it into the distance, turn around, go back, take down the tripod and the camera, and do all of that. It's like, I'm just happy to hike the trail, it's like set up my camp and enjoy some hot meals and enjoy the stars and the scenery and
Yeah.
my friends. So
Yeah. And the adventure too, even when in 2011, my first thru hike, we had to use paper maps and compass. There wasn't the GPS. That was like adventure. We couldn't figure out which one was forest or pass in the snow. And that, like, there's just feels like there's more memories from that because it was more adventurous than, oh, just look at my Gaia or gut hook or something. And it's easy.
Follow the blue line, the blue dot, I, in 2014, I did the section hike, the Theodore Solomon's Trail.
Yeah.
And that's a trail that was developed. The history of that's fascinating because it was developed in 1974 as basically just stitching together existing trails to form a route. It wasn't an official trail or anything like that. But the reason they did that, it's on the western side of the Sierras, and the goal was to alleviate the overcrowding on the John Muir Trail in 1974.
Wow.
And you think about that, it's like, wow, they were worried about how crowded the John Muir Trail was in 1974 and came up with this route. Well, that felt like an adventure, even though I had, like Gaia GPS and, that sort of thing with me. It was still an adventure because a lot of the trails on that route have not seen maintenance in 20 years, some of them. And so there was a lot of route finding, even with GPS. It's like, well, the trail used to run through here.
Yep.
And now it's just like trees and shrubs, and there's, it's completely overgrown. And there were a couple times where I'm like, well, I could perish out here. It could happen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I've had a pretty good run, and that felt like that was probably the most adventure I've had on a backpacking trip. It was so remote and so much undeveloped and untrafficked routes, so many untrafficked routes that it kind of blew my mind that it's out there. And you have to go far for that.
Totally. I did some of it with Airborne. And there were a couple sections where you just like fan out, look for a hint of trail, or it's
a tree cut,
different,
or whatever. Yeah.
It's so different. And the John Muir Trail is only a couple miles or a few miles as the crow flies and stuff from there, but no one goes on the Theodore Solomon route. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for joining. This was great. Chop it up with some stories, cover about 44 years of backpacking.
Well, and we didn't even touch on my ultra running history.
Let's go there. What's your ultra running history?
Well, 0. I've done 3 full marathons and a number of half marathons, and that's it. I ran in high school, cross country and track, mainly distance, back then. So, but my running days are behind me. It's like my knees. I've got torn meniscus in both knees, and my ankles are hurting. And it's like, yeah, I can hike, I can bike, I can do that kind of thing and stay active. But I'm probably not going to do a lot of running.
Yeah. Well, at least the knees are even with a torn meniscus in each one.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not
Awesome.
favoring one or the other.
Yeah. You're limping at the same time on both of them. Well, thanks for coming on. This was great.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's good to talk to you, Jeff. I love being part of the month of Jeffs, and look forward to catching up with all the other Jeffs throughout the month.
Yeah, we should start instead of 6-pack of peaks, we should just do like a Jeff community online or something.
Awesome. I love it.
Jeff meetups.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, patreon.com/freeoutside. Help support the show for $5 a month with bonus content every Wednesday. I just do too much, don't I? Okay, that is where we're going to stop it today. Thank you all. We love the ratings, reviews. If you share this too, it just really helps us grow. And with that, stay elite, my friends.